The lights never go off in Pelican Bay. Even at 3 a.m., when the world outside sleeps, the men inside those gray walls are wide awake, haunted by the sounds of their own breathing, the rattling of chains, and the endless echo of metal doors slamming shut. That night, the silence broke. A scream, deep, rough, full of pain, tore through the solitary block. It came from cell 208. The guards rushed down the tier, boots pounding the concrete floor. When they reached the door, they froze. Inside, Marcus Hill, a man once feared across the streets of Los Angeles, was sitting in the corner, shaking. His eyes were wide open, fixed on the wall, whispering something no one could understand. For years, Marcus ruled his world. A gang leader. A man who showed no fear. But now, in Pelican Bay's security housing unit, the SHU, he was cracking. And the question everyone asked later was the same. What did Pelican Bay do to break him? The guard's flashlight caught the words Marcus had scratched into the wall with a piece of metal. It said, "I hear them at night. They don't stop talking." No one knew who they were. The next morning, word spread through the yard like wildfire. The man who once laughed at death had lost his mind. And the truth? He wasn't the first. Months earlier, when Marcus first arrived at Pelican Bay, he thought he could handle it. "This ain't nothing," he told the intake officer. "I've seen worse." He was wrong. From the moment the steel door closed behind him, he realized this wasn't an ordinary prison. There were no sounds of laughter, no voices calling out from cell to cell. Only silence. Thick, heavy silence. Each inmate was locked alone, 23 hours a day. No contact. No sunlight. No warmth. His first week, Marcus tried to keep his mind busy. He worked out, counted cracks in the walls, hummed songs he remembered from the radio. But by day 7, the walls started to close in. He said he could feel the building breathing, like it was alive. One night, while trying to sleep, Marcus swore he heard whispering in the vents. At first, he thought it was other inmates communicating, tapping codes or passing messages. But these weren't taps. They were voices. Faint, broken voices calling his name. He tried to block them out, shouting at the top of his lungs. A guard came by and slammed the door slot open. "Quiet down, Hill." But the voices never stopped. By the second month, Marcus began writing letters, pages filled with nonsense. Words that didn't make sense even to him. The prison psychologist called it the Pelican Bay effect. Some inmates hallucinate after weeks of isolation. Others forget how to talk. But Marcus wasn't ready to admit he was slipping. He told himself he was strong, stronger than anyone in that place. Until the day he saw something he couldn't explain. During his 1 hour of yard time, he walked in circles inside a small concrete box, no bigger than a garage. He looked up and saw a shadow cross the sky. But there was no sound, no movement, just that strange shape gliding above him. When he asked a guard about it later, the man just laughed. "You'll see a lot of things here, Hill. Question is, how long before you start believing them?" That night, the whispering came back, louder, closer. He pressed his ear against the vent, and he heard a voice say his name again. Only this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was clear. Familiar. "Marcus." He froze. That was his brother's voice. His brother who had been dead for 3 years. His hands trembled as he backed away from the wall. No, that's not real," he said under his breath. But then the voice spoke again, this time saying something that made his blood run cold. "You don't get out, Marcus. Nobody gets out." He screamed until his throat burned, kicking the steel door until his foot bled. Guards rushed over, shouting for him to stop, but he couldn't. When the psychologist came to see him the next morning, Marcus was calm again, too calm. He sat on his bunk, staring at the vent. "They talked to me," he said quietly. "They told me what's coming." The doctor looked at him with concern. "What's coming, Marcus?" He slowly turned his head, his eyes dull and lifeless. "You'll see," he said. And that was the last normal thing Marcus ever said. 2 days later, the guards found him standing in his cell at 2 a.m., whispering to the wall again, just before the screaming started. The sound of screaming carried through the halls of Pelican Bay like a warning. Guards ran toward the SHU block, radios crackling, keys jangling at their belts. When they reached Marcus Hill's cell, the noise stopped. Dead silence. "Open it," one of them said. The steel door slid open with a slow, grinding screech. Marcus stood there, motionless. His eyes were wide, his face pale. And carved into the wall behind him, in shaky, uneven letters, were the words, "They're real." The psychologist was called immediately. But by the time she arrived, Marcus had stopped speaking altogether. He just sat on the floor, staring straight ahead, like he was watching something that no one else could see. For the next 48 hours, he didn't eat, didn't move, didn't sleep. Every time a guard tried to talk to him, he whispered the same thing. "They're coming for me." Then one night, it happened. It started around midnight. The cameras in the SHU flickered, something that rarely happened. On the screen, Marcus could be seen pacing back and forth in his cell. Then suddenly he froze. He turned toward the vent and smiled. The control room guards watched in confusion. "What's he doing?" one asked. But before anyone could answer, Marcus began talking to the vent, calmly, quietly, like he was having a conversation. Then he tilted his head, as if he was listening to someone talk back. The officers rushed down the hall to check on him, but when they arrived, Marcus was lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, completely silent. He wasn't injured. He wasn't asleep. He was just gone inside. After that night, Marcus was transferred to the prison's mental health wing. But something about him never returned. He wouldn't speak to anyone, not even the doctors. He refused food for days, and when he finally did talk, he only said one sentence. "They told me I'd see them again." Months passed. Word about Marcus spread through the prison. Some inmates said he went crazy because of the isolation. Others whispered that he really heard something in those vents. Either way, the story became a legend. A few years later, a journalist named Ryan Caldwell got permission to visit Pelican Bay. He'd heard about Marcus Hill, the gang leader who lost his mind in solitary confinement, and wanted to write about it. The guards led him through the corridors, gray walls, thick doors, and a silence so heavy it made his chest tighten. When he reached the SHU, one of the older officers stopped him. "You sure you want to go in there?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "I need the truth," he said. The officer unlocked the door and stepped aside. "Truth is," he muttered, "no one walks out the same after being in there." Ryan entered the narrow hallway. Every cell looked identical, except one. The walls in Marcus's old cell still had deep scratches on them, faded but visible. Ryan ran his fingers along the marks and whispered to himself, "He really wrote this." But just as he pulled his hand away, he heard something faint, a soft tapping sound from the vent above. He froze. Then silence. "Probably just the air," he said nervously, forcing a laugh. But as he turned to leave, the tapping came again. Only this time, it sounded like whispering. And it said something that made his blood turn cold. "Ryan." He spun around, flashlight shaking in his hand. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. Just that low, humming sound from the vent. Ryan left the cell immediately, pale and shaken. When he told the warden what happened, the man only sighed. "You're not the first to hear that," he said quietly. "We stopped sending new guards into that block alone years ago." Marcus Hill's case was later cited in reports about the effects of solitary confinement. The psychologists called it sensory deprivation, a breakdown of the mind after too much isolation. But inside Pelican Bay, the inmates have a different name for it. They call it the whisper. Some say it's just the sound of air moving through the ducts. Others believe it's the voices of men who lost themselves inside those concrete walls, calling out to anyone who will listen. Either way, Pelican Bay remains one of the most feared prisons in America, not just for the violence, but for what it does to the human mind. Because in there, time doesn't just pass, it breaks you. And as for Marcus Hill, he was never seen in general population again. His name was quietly removed from the records. But sometimes, on quiet nights, the guards still say they hear it, that faint voice through the vents. Whispering, begging, warning. You don't get out. Nobody gets out.